I often discuss concepts of Atma, Karma, Dharma, and reincarnation here. We state that these are the basis of an ancient knowledge. I want to take a look at when in the past these ideas originated. This makes a difference in our understanding of the world. Why is that? You could take the measure of complexity of a philosophy as a reflection of the intellect or creativity of the ancient people who came up with it. Now, why do I mention creativity or intellect? Because if you believe in what is said, if you believe in the statements, the concepts, then we talk about the intellect of the people who came up with the concept. If you don't believe in reincarnation, if you don't believe in the presence of a soul, if you believe there are figments of imagination, then at least it talks to the creativity of the people who came up with this concept. Think about it. It is easy to look up at the star-studded ancient night sky and think of a glittering heaven. It is also very easy to get scared of thunder and lightning and come to a conclusion that powers beyond us are angry. But it takes enormous amount of intellect or creativity for an ancient to proclaim that the material world, the world that we see around us, is illusory and we are part of the God energy. And that without realizing that we are part of the God energy, we would be caught in an endless cycle of birth and death. So this is a big leap in terms of intellect or creativity. This is why we want to understand the time when people started coming up with philosophies of reincarnation, karma, etc. Conventional wisdom states that the further you move into the past, the more primitive the human is and the more simpler the philosophy. But that's not the case here. The Vedantic Upanishads are some of the early texts that align completely with the core of this philosophy. They have a long history of oral transmission. There are many references to the concept of the Brahman, the Atman, and the cycle of birth and death in many ancient Hindu texts, including the epics of Ramayana and Mahabharata. The written recension of Mahabharata, one of the ancient Hindu epics, has been dated conventionally to around 1000 BCE, but most scholars, ancient and modern, agree that the war and the incidents narrated in the Mahabharata took place much before that. Aryabhatta, an ancient Indian astronomer and mathematician, dates the battle detailed in the Mahabharata to a precise date of 18th February 3102 BCE. Inscriptions at Aihole, a 6th century temple, claims that 3735 years have elapsed since the war. This puts the date again at around 3100 BCE. Recently, using the methods of archaeoastronomy, the claims of these ancients has been verified. Though this 3100 BCE was the date of the battle, and that's agreed by most scholars, the verses in some of these scriptures seems to be describing incidents considered historical at that time. We want to look at the Puranas, another genre of literature. The conventional dating of the Puranas is very tricky. Scholars have dated the oldest Puranas to about 2500 years. But these dates are just of the texts that have been found. The Puranas also have undergone many additions and edits over time. Now, scholars conclude that some core older versions must have existed because many Upanishads and other ancient texts mention Puranas as a subject of study, and the word Purana itself translates to of old. The Puranas have many narrations that point to an ancient night sky as well. Today we will take a look at the story of Dhruva, mentioned in many Puranas, the story of a young boy who, on account of his focused meditation, was elevated to the position of the pole star. Dhruva was a young boy and the son of a king, Uttanapada. As a 5-year-old child, Dhruva sees his stepbrother Uttama sitting on his father's lap. He tries to climb onto the king's lap as well, but Dhruva's stepmother chastises him for trying to sit on the king's lap. She berates him, saying that the position, the throne, belongs to Uttama, her son alone. The king stays silent, afraid to displease his favorite queen. Dhruva goes in grief to his mother, the queen Suniti. She cries on witnessing this treatment, but consoles him, saying what the other queen said is false, and if he needed answers to his predicament, he should engage in meditating on the god energy Vishnu. Now, Dhruva was the son of a king, a warrior. The young boy, the child, immediately left for the forest and undertook a severe penance, with his mind focused on the god energy Vishnu. Pleased with his focus, dedication, and steadfastness, he is given a kingdom, and after his reign is elevated to the status of the pole star, or so the Purana claims. By the way, I have just told you 10% of the story and skipped very, very crucial parts of it, which I will get back to in a minute. So please, stay on till the end. We see the story of Dhruva in 3 Puranas, the Vishnu Purana, the Brahmanda Purana, and the Bhagavata Purana, among others. I wanted to now analyze this narration from an archaeo-astronomical point of view. Now here is the problem, and here is the mystery. When the story of Dhruva was written, even with the conventional dating of the Puranas to around 2500 years ago, there was no clear pole star. The current pole star Polaris had not assumed the position of the pole star. So what star did the ancients point to as the pole star, as Dhruva, if there was actually no pole star? Now, a segue into some astronomy. You can skip a few minutes if you know all this. Our current pole star is Polaris. Because the Earth's north pole points directly at the star, you can see the entire night sky moving around Polaris, which is fixed at the center. I'm using Stellarium, a software, to show this to you. However, Polaris was not always the pole star. The Earth's axis is currently tilted at an angle of 23.5 degrees, but this was not always the case. The tilt of the Earth's axis oscillates between 22.1 and 24.5 degrees over a cycle that lasts around 41,000 years. In fact, this change in tilt even causes seasons to be exaggerated. As the tilt increases, it causes hotter summers and colder winters. In addition to the oscillating tilt, the axis of the Earth precesses, like the axis of a spinning top. This happens over a cycle of 25,722 years. As a result, the pole star that we see today, Polaris, was not the pole star in the year 1000 BCE, the conventional dating of the Puranas. There was no discernible pole star. I'm using the software Stellarium to show you the night sky that the ancients would have looked at. This is what they would have seen in around 1000 BCE. As you can see, there is no clear pole star, and Polaris had not taken the spot of a pole star. So what star did the ancients in this Purana point to? In 2001, there was a paper that was published in the Indian Journal of History of Science that analyzed the story of Dhruva. The paper analyzes the description of constellations around Dhruva and the movement of the pole star itself, and comes to a conclusion that Dhruva, the ancient pole star, was Thuban, a star in the constellation Draco. In the scriptures, it is said that Thuban was part of the Sishumara constellation, the constellation that looks like a Gangetic dolphin or a porpoise. As you can see, Thuban was the pole star at around 3000 BCE, and at around 2000 BCE, it gave up its position as the pole star. So the Puranas too seem to describe a night sky that is 5,000 years old. I will make a more detailed video on this paper if anyone is interested in archaeoastronomy. I've also given a link to this paper in the description. This is where most research ends. But there are many parts of the narrative that I missed out in the story that make it even more interesting and mysterious. Remember when Dhruva undertook a severe penance and the god energy in the form of Vishnu appeared before him? When the young boy initially undertakes the penance, his focus was so terrific that when he stops breathing, the worlds were being suffocated. Even Indra, the king of the Devas, is scared. But no one is able to dissuade Dhruva or shake his focused meditation. Finally, the god energy Vishnu appears before him. As a boon, Dhruva asks the god energy to allow him to properly eulogize the energy. He asks for nothing more. But Vishnu knew the intent in Dhruva's heart, and Dhruva is rewarded with the throne and a kingdom. Now, here is the statement. In the Purana, Vishnu says, "The moment your father leaves for the forest, you will be awarded the entire world. Under the pious protection of your rule, it will, for 36,000 years uninterrupted, be in full control of your faculties." Now I know 36,000 years seems preposterous, but let's hold on to that thought for a minute. Let us continue with the story of Dhruva. Dhruva returns from the forest, but he was not very happy. He laments for having asked for material wealth when he could have attained spiritual liberation. He cries, "I approached him who can cut all bonds, but prayed for what is perishable. I, alas, out of foolishness, asked for material prosperity." He continues, "I, under the influence of the outer world, lamented that my brother was my enemy, even though he belongs to the temporary world." But these lamentations aside, Dhruva did become the king and ruled for 36,000 years. The Bhagavata Purana details how Dhruva eventually became the pole star, and this is where things get interesting. Remember Uttama, Dhruva's stepbrother? He ventures into a forest and is killed by an yaksha. Yakshas, according to the Puranas, are benevolent nature spirits, but in this case, one of the yakshas kills Uttama. Dhruva swears revenge and goes to the city of the yakshas. He begins a war with them and indiscriminately hurts and kills many yakshas. Finally, he is urged by his ancestors that this indiscriminate killing and hurting is wrong. He is told the killing of living beings is certainly never the way of those who honestly follow the path of God. Taking the body for the self, one becomes like the animals. How can someone like you, Dhruva, engage in such an abomination? Dhruva, who once lamented that he had asked for wealth and a kingdom that is temporary, realizes that he has now descended into the depths of his baser emotions and instincts. He apologizes to Kubera, a semi-divine being and the king of the Yakshas, having realized his folly. Then, Dhruva comes back and rules with benevolence for 36,000 years. He considers everything that he has temporary, and when the time comes, abdicates his throne, goes to the forest, and performs a meditation again, by which he finally attains the position of the pole star. At the time when he departs to become the pole star, like a dutiful son, he remembers his mother. He is informed that she has preceded him and will be close to him in the celestial realm. Let's come back to the question that is on everybody's mind. 36,000 years seems like a preposterous timeline. Long lifespans are a common occurrence in many ancient texts across faiths, but 36,000 years? Is there something that we are missing? What is interesting is that the ancients who wrote the Puranas knew how to measure time to a really good accuracy. The Brahmanda Purana, in which the story of Dhruva is detailed, states this: 15 nimeshas constitute one kashta, 30 kashta make one kala, 30 kalas make a muhurta, and 30 such muhurtas make a full day consisting of day and night. Going by Western measures, they knew how to measure up to microseconds. They also knew that the seasons would cause the shortening and lengthening of days. Why then is this timeline of 36,000 years mentioned? So this is not the only place or the only culture in which the time period of 36,000 occurs. Some of the scriptures state that the lifespan of the Devas, the celestial beings, is 100 years. However, one celestial year, or the year for the demigods, equals 360 solar years. 100 years of the Devas is 36,000 solar years. By the way, these Devas, demigods, or celestials are typically not objects of worship. It is essential to understand that all these deities, races of beings, Devas, Danavas, Daityas, Asuras, are sibling races and descendants of the daughters of Daksha, who was the mind-born son of Brahma, the creative energy. The Purana has narratives on their physical exploits, but also often these beings are identified with the stars and planets. They are subject to the laws of karma and rebirth as we are, though they might have higher capabilities. The 36,000 years appears in Greek philosophy as well. Plato, who we often talk about here because Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, they have a lot of parallels to Vedantic Hinduism in that they also believe in the concept of karma and reincarnation. Plato hypothesized that if the movement of the stars and other celestial objects are reversed, they would come back to the same position once every 36,000 years. He called this period the Great Year. Now, there are many symbolic elements in the narrative of Dhruva as well. Suruchi, the name of his stepmother, translates to delight, the one who delights. The name Suniti, Dhruva's mother, translates to one of good conduct. The name Dhruva itself translates to fixed or immovable. In a way, at least according to how I see it, Dhruva's story also represents the fall of wisdom. The young boy who undertakes such a severe spiritual practice goes on to be ensnared by his baser instincts. Finally, he gains wisdom, participates in the world without attachment, discharging his duties as a king righteously, and then moves on to be raised to the highest level. Did the ancients look up at the night sky and write this as their version of as above, so below? I leave the interpretation to you. However you may see this, it is indeed a giant leap for the ancients to come up with the concepts of reincarnation and Maya, compared to, say, a powerful god in the sky who pushes down lightning and thunder. Even if we do not agree on a 36,000 year timeline, the night sky described in some of these Puranas and the Mahabharata push the date to at least 3000 BCE, which is 5,000 years ago. Imagine what it would have taken 5,000 years ago for our ancestors to look at the mountains, the rivers, the stars, the oceans, and state boldly that these were all illusory. What it would have taken for the ancients to look at the dead and to say to themselves that unless the deceased left without desires, they would be back. I would say it takes phenomenal intellect. As always, the known is a drop and the unknown an ocean. Peace.